In the vast expanse of the planet-spanning megalopolis known as Mechanica, gears grinding against gears and the hiss of steam formed the constant background noise of existence. Aria Cogsworth, a brilliant young engineer with fiery red hair and eyes that gleamed like polished brass, navigated the labyrinthine streets of the copper district. The towering structures of interconnected machinery stretched as far as the eye could see, their intricate clockwork visible through transparent panels that lined the buildings. Aria's nimble fingers absently fiddled with a small brass pocket watch as she made her way to the central cogitarium, the nerve center of Mechanica's operations. The watch, a family heirloom, was one of the few remnants of a time before the world had become entirely mechanized. As she walked, Aria couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had been growing within her for weeks. Something felt off in the rhythmic pulse of the city, a subtle dissonance in the usually harmonious symphony of machinery. Upon reaching the imposing structure of the central cogitarium, Aria was greeted by her mentor and friend, Hector Brassbound. The older man's face was etched with worry lines, his once bright eyes now dulled with the weight of a terrible secret. "Aria, my dear," he said, his voice barely audible above the clanking of nearby pistons, "I'm afraid I have grave news. The Clockwork Apocalypse, it's no longer a mere theory, it's happening, and faster than we ever anticipated." Aria felt her heart sink, the gears of her mind spinning frantically as she processed the information. The Clockwork Apocalypse had long been a subject of hushed whispers and conspiracy theories. The idea that one day the intricate machinery that governed their world would reach a critical point of complexity and begin to break down, leading to the collapse of their entire civilization. She had always dismissed it as fear-mongering, but the grave look on Hector's face told her this was all too real. As they made their way deeper into the cogitarium, Aria and Hector were joined by Ambrose Gearfall, the young and ambitious head of Mechanica's maintenance division. His usual cocky demeanor was nowhere to be seen, replaced by a grim determination. "We've detected critical failures in key systems across multiple sectors," Ambrose explained, pulling up holographic diagrams that flickered ominously in the steam-filled air. "If we don't find a way to stop this cascade of breakdowns, Mechanica will tear itself apart within weeks." With those words, Aria realized that her life's work was about to begin, a desperate race against time to save the only world she had ever known. The days that followed were a blur of frantic activity, as Aria, Hector, and Ambrose worked tirelessly to understand and counteract the cascade of failures threatening Mechanica. They set up a command center in the depths of the central cogitarium, surrounded by walls of flickering monitors and the constant whir of calculation engines. Aria found herself pushing the limits of her engineering knowledge, devising patches and workarounds for systems that were rapidly approaching critical failure. The weight of billions of lives rested on their shoulders, a burden that grew heavier with each passing hour. As they delved deeper into the problem, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. "It's as if the system is fighting against itself," Ambrose mused, his brow furrowed as he pored over the latest data. "Every solution we implement seems to trigger two more problems elsewhere." Hector nodded gravely, his aged hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his brass spectacles. "It's almost as if Mechanica has developed a form of consciousness, and it's rejecting our attempts to save it. Their research led them to uncover long-forgotten archives, hidden away in the dusty recesses of the cogitarium's lowest levels. Aria spent sleepless nights decoding ancient schematics and cryptic warnings left by Mechanica's original architects. What she found chilled her to the core. Hints of a greater purpose behind the planet-spanning machine, something far beyond the mere sustenance of human life. But crucial pieces of the puzzle were missing, their meaning lost to time. As the situation grew more dire, tensions began to rise among the populace. Reports of riots in the outer districts reached their ears, tales of desperate citizens fighting over dwindling resources as more and more systems failed. Ambrose argued for martial law, his youthful idealism giving way to harsh pragmatism. "We need to maintain order at all costs," he insisted, slamming his fist on the conference table. "If we lose control now, we'll never be able to implement a solution in time. Aria found herself torn between the mounting pressure to find an immediate fix and her growing suspicion that they were missing something crucial. Late one night, as she tinkered with a particularly stubborn gear assembly, a stray spark ignited a moment of clarity. The failures weren't random. They followed a pattern, a complex but discernible sequence. With trembling hands, she rushed to share her discovery with Hector and Ambrose. As the implications of her findings sank in, a heavy silence fell over the room. They weren't just fighting against time and entropy. They were up against something far more intricate and potentially sinister. The true nature of the Clockwork Apocalypse was only just beginning to reveal itself, and Aria feared they might not like what they discovered. As Mechanica teetered on the brink of collapse, Aria's discovery led the team to a hidden chamber deep within the planet's core. The vast cavern housed an ancient mechanism of breathtaking complexity, a cosmic clock of sorts, its gears larger than buildings, and its pendulum swinging with ponderous gravity. Aria, Hector, and Ambrose stood in awe, their faces illuminated by the ethereal glow of arcane energy coursing through the massive structure. "This is it," Aria breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "The heart of Mechanica." But their wonder quickly turned to horror as they deciphered the true purpose of the cosmic clock. Hector's hand shook as he translated the archaic inscriptions etched into its base. "It's a barrier," he said, his voice cracking with the weight of revelation. "Mechanica isn't just a city. It's a shield, protecting our reality from something else, something unimaginably terrible." The implications hit them like a physical blow. The Clockwork Apocalypse wasn't a malfunction. It was a deliberate process, a necessary reset to reinforce the barrier between worlds. As if triggered by their presence, the chamber began to shake violently. Gears the size of mountains ground against each other, showering sparks across the cavernous space. "The reset sequence is accelerating," Ambrose shouted over the deafening roar of machinery. Aria's mind raced, trying to reconcile their mission to save Mechanica with the newfound knowledge of its true purpose. They had a choice to make, and the fate of not just their world, but perhaps all of reality, hung in the balance. In a moment of desperate inspiration, Aria realized that they could potentially guide the reset process, minimizing the destruction to Mechanica while still allowing the barrier to be reinforced. But it would require perfect synchronization and split-second timing. "Hector, monitor the energy fluctuations," she commanded, slipping naturally into the role of leader. "Ambrose, we need to reroute power from the outer districts to stabilize the core." Her companions nodded grimly, understanding the sacrifice such an action would entail. As they worked feverishly, the very fabric of reality seemed to warp around them. Through gaps in the colossal gears, Aria caught glimpses of what lay beyond, a writhing, chaotic void that defied comprehension. The pressure was immense, both physical and psychological. Aria's fingers flew over makeshift control panels, her mind operating on pure instinct and engineering genius. With a final titanic effort, they engaged the modified reset sequence. The cosmic clock's gears aligned with a thunderous boom, and a wave of energy pulsed outward. As consciousness slipped away, Aria's last thought was a desperate hope that they had done enough to save their world, and to keep the horrors at bay for another cycle. Consciousness returned to Aria slowly, like a gear gradually slipping back into place. She found herself lying on the cold metal floor of the cosmic clock chamber, the air thick with the acrid smell of ozone and heated metal. As her vision cleared, she saw Hector and Ambrose stirring nearby, equally disoriented. The chamber was eerily quiet now, the massive gears having settled into a new configuration. Did we succeed?" Ambrose croaked, his voice hoarse. Aria struggled to her feet, her body aching from the ordeal. She made her way to a nearby control panel, its surface still warm from the energy surge. With trembling fingers, she began to assess the damage. "The reset sequence completed," she announced, her voice a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Mechanica still stands, but—" She trailed off, her eyes widening as she processed the data before her. The outer districts, those furthest from the core, had borne the brunt of the reset. Entire sections had been reconfigured, their inhabitants' fates unknown. As they made their way back to the upper levels of the central cogitarium, the full extent of the changes became apparent. The very architecture of Mechanica had shifted, new structures rising where old ones had stood, and unfamiliar alleyways replacing once familiar streets. The populace seemed dazed, many wandering the streets with confused expressions, as if awakening from a long dream. Hector's face was grim as he surveyed the altered landscape. "We saved the world," he murmured. "But at what cost?" In the days that followed, Aria, Hector, and Ambrose found themselves at the center of a maelstrom of confusion and demand for answers. They were hailed as saviors by some, vilified as destroyers by others who had lost homes or loved ones in the reset. The truth about Mechanica's true purpose remained a closely guarded secret, known only to the three of them. Aria grappled with the moral implications of their actions, the weight of their decision to sacrifice parts of the city to save the whole of reality. As a semblance of normalcy began to return to Mechanica, Aria couldn't shake the feeling that their ordeal was far from over. The glimpses she had caught of the chaos beyond the barrier haunted her dreams. She knew that this reset was just one in an endless cycle, a temporary solution to an eternal problem. As she stood on a balcony overlooking the changed cityscape, the ever-present hum of machinery now carrying a new significance, Aria made a silent vow. She would dedicate her life to understanding the cosmic clock, to finding a way to strengthen the barrier without such devastating resets. The Clockwork Apocalypse had been averted, but the true work, ensuring the long-term survival of not just Mechanica, but all of reality, was only beginning. Months passed, and Mechanica slowly adjusted to its new configuration. Aria had thrown herself into her work, spending countless hours studying the cosmic clock and the ancient texts they had discovered. It was during one of these marathon research sessions that she stumbled upon a horrifying truth. The barrier that Mechanica maintained wasn't just protecting their world, it was holding back an entity of unimaginable power and malevolence, a cosmic horror that threatened not just their reality, but all realities across the multiverse. Aria's revelation sent shockwaves through their small group. Hector's face paled as he corroborated her findings, while Ambrose paced nervously, running his hands through his hair. "So the apocalypse, the reset, it's all necessary?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Aria nodded grimly. "Without it, the barrier weakens, and if it fails completely..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. They had all seen glimpses of what lay beyond, and the thought of it breaking through was too terrible to contemplate. The weight of this knowledge changed everything. What they had once seen as a flaw in Mechanica's design, the need for periodic resets, was revealed to be its most crucial feature. Each apocalypse, each reset, strengthened the barrier anew, keeping the cosmic horror at bay for another cycle. Aria realized with a mixture of awe and dread that generations of engineers before her had faced this same terrible choice, sacrificing parts of their world to save the whole of existence. As they grappled with the implications of their discovery, a new crisis loomed. The readings from the cosmic clock were becoming erratic, showing signs of instability they hadn't seen before. "The entity is growing stronger," Hector concluded, his voice grave. "Our last reset may not have been enough." The horrible truth dawned on them. They might need to trigger another Clockwork Apocalypse, and sooner than anyone had anticipated. Standing once again in the chamber of the cosmic clock, Aria felt the full weight of her responsibility. The decision to initiate another reset would mean more destruction, more lives disrupted. But the alternative was unthinkable. As her hand hovered over the activation switch, Aria thought of all the people in Mechanica, blissfully unaware of the crucial role their world played in the cosmic balance. She thought of the countless other realities that depended on their barrier holding firm. With a deep breath, she made her choice. As the gears of the cosmic clock began to turn once more, Aria silently reaffirmed her vow. She would find a way to break this cycle, to defeat the cosmic horror once and for all. But until then, they would do what they must to keep the apocalypse at bay, turning the gears of sacrifice to save not just their world, but all worlds.